Our final and last but not least presenter is Troy Staudt. He's from Gilbert Middle School, correct? He's going to be presenting on some of the tools that are out there, but also some of the computer science things that he does in the classroom. More specifically, innovative tools you'll see over here. He does have a couple of the drones that they have at Gilbert Middle School. That's exciting. Also, I just want a couple of things to mention before perhaps you have to leave right after this session. Dan wanted to, if you saw in the back channel, we wanted to create a Google Plus community for computer science educators, starting in Heartland maybe, and then expanding across the state, and then hopefully, expanding beyond the state. Who knows, whoever joins the Google Plus community. So Dan has created one. We're going to help promote it at Heartland. We're going to help, facilitate that in whatever way we can help. But really it does, as far as a Google Plus community goes, and the link is up here, I'll also put it on the agenda, and we'll send it out on our MailChimp mailing. Once the YouTube videos are coming out, we'll send it through there as well. But as you know, with anything, as far as like a Google Plus community or what have you, it really matters as far as the participation from the actual posters in the community. So, the Iowa STEM Council and this idea that we might be having a computer science, more maybe specific requirement. Not sure what that entails, but the legislator has been talking about that. That might change things drastically as far as what you offer in your districts. And so to be proactive about that and have discussions about that and start thinking about what we can bring into the classroom, I think this Google Plus community could be really good. And we'll continue to promote that. So if you want to join, you click on the link and you'll request to join, and Dan will add you in. And I don't know, maybe you do a quick welcome post. Here's who I am, here's where I work at, and this is what I'm doing. Okay, sorry, Troy. We'll get started with Troy, and he's from Gilbert Middle School.
All right. Thanks, Tyler. First of all, just a little bit about myself. Much like what Dan talked about, I wasn't trained in computer science or anything like that. I was actually a social studies teacher for 5 years, and got out of teaching for a little bit, and then hopped back into it about close to 10 years ago on the computer side of things. And I've been at Gilbert for 5 years now. Started off there in a role more of a registrar / state reporting / head of IT kind of job. And then we kind of did some reorganizing. The guy that was in my role was doing middle school technology and also teaching math, and we had a need for more of a math teacher. And my experience prior to that was a little bit more on the instructional side, so I shuffled over to doing the middle school technology classes that we have, and have been in that role this will be my 4th year in that role. And so it's the way we have it formatted. We have a 6th grade exploratory class that I teach, where I see a group of kids for 7 weeks, and then it just rotates throughout the year. And then I also see our 7th and 8th graders on a every other day rotation opposite of their PE class. So I see them throughout the year for essentially what amounts to a semester, kind of. Okay, so it's about half the time. And so there are some challenges with that. I do still have a lab that I teach in. However, kind of like what Dan said, honestly, the computers that we have in there, in my particular lab, we are a Chromebook school, which I'll get into here in a minute. We all have Chromebooks, so we do use them for certain things that maybe are Apple specific. But other than that, I'll be honest, they don't get used a heck of a lot unless kids prefer to work on them, and a lot of times they prefer to work in their Chromebooks. And so I still have that space, but at the same time being tied to classes, I don't have a lot of time to go out and connect with teachers like I would like. There are certain teachers that I'll meet with and talk to before school or during some team time that we have. But a lot of times during their team time, I have a class, my exploratory or something like that. So it does present some challenges. There are some things that we've kind of tweaked through the years I've been there, but it's like everybody I think in this role, there's still some things to be figured out. The other thing that I guess I've focused on trying to change since I took over the middle school job, the gentleman before me who did a good job, but a lot of what he did was essentially they'd be working on a spreadsheet in science or in math, and so there would just be time given during his class to work on that. Really kind of started to shift toward trying to make it more of a computer science type of class where they're learning some coding, they're learning some different things that they aren't necessarily directly doing in the classroom, or taking some projects or some things, some applications that we hadn't done before and finding a way to tie that into what they were doing in class, whether that be a video type of application or a different type of presentation, things like that. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about those types of things a little bit. First of all, again, the technology that we have, we are a Chromebook school. This is our 4th year of having Chromebooks. The first model that we went with is the Samsung model that was out there. It was one of the early Chromebooks, the silver ones, and they lasted pretty good for about a year and a half. And honestly, with the kids taking them home by the 3rd year last year, I don't know if anybody else is still going through that with the Samsungs or anything, but they were done. Last year was kind of a nightmare for us trying to keep them going and keep them running. I think a lot of it, at the time, I think we made a good choice with the device we had. I think it was the best bang for the buck at the time. But if anybody out there is a Chromebook school, you probably know now that there's, at the time that we purchased them, there were very few models. Now pretty much every major player that makes a PC makes a Chromebook. Our high school has had Chromebooks. They went the year after we did, and they went with the Dell model. We researched and looked at 5 or 6 different models last year on what we were going to do for our revamp, and we decided to go with the Chromebook Dell 11, the 2nd generation one that they have. And so far this year, it's been a much more rugged model. It's a much speedier model for us. So we're pretty happy with our choice so far. There's starting to be more and more things now that Chromebooks have Android that I'm excited about, that in the future with touchscreens and things like that, what that could lead to. But when we had to make our decision last year where we were going, that was all kind of still up in the air a little bit on what that was going to mean and what models it was going to be coming to, when and why, and if it would immediately lead to spending a little bit more money and having some value toward their learning. And those are things that we couldn't really answer when we decided. But we've been pretty happy with the Dell version that we've had so far. So we've got about 380 students or so in our middle school, and they all take them home, so they all have access to it. We also have an iPad cart of 30 still. There are some things that we still think this is something that we've had for the last 3 years, and we still do find some good uses for the iPads, as far as like if we have a project where students need to take video, using GarageBand, iMovie editing, things like that we still use some the iPad carts for. And then on top of my lab, we still do have actually a standalone lab in our LMC. Really, as far as I'm concerned, there's really only one thing that I'll use it for, which is our Minecraft EDU unit that we do. Other than that, there is not a lot of use of that lab, to be honest with you. Again, since the kids have their Chromebooks, there just isn't that big of use. Every once in a while, a teacher will bring a group down just because they want the actual screen and the mouse and things like that. But overall, like I said, I could see that going away in the next couple of years. Okay, a little bit about our 6th grade exploratory. My focus for the 6th grade exploratory is really to prepare them kind of for the rest of their educational career. We're a Google school, obviously with Chromebooks, we kind of need to be. So we use a lot of the Google stuff, and we kind of get them a foundation for creating a document, creating a presentation. I also go through Google Forms with them and how they can utilize that to gather information. And then we also focus a lot on typing. Those are kind of our goals for that 6th grade exploratory. I'll be the first to admit it's not the most engaging class for these guys, but what I try and sell them on is that these are things that they're going to be using really from 6th grade on through high school and college and really for the rest of their life. And I really try and sell typing as a skill, and the teachers that I work with in the 6th grade team really try and sell that as well about, you're going to be expected to use your Chromebook, you're going to be expected to write papers, you're going to be expected to write things out a lot. And the more efficient typer you are, the better typer you are, the more efficient you're going to be in your schoolwork and your learning. So again, it's about a 7-week rotation, and then we see a new group. In fact, I'm supposed to have a new group today, but I'll get with them tomorrow. Okay. So as far as working through sort of computer science, we're really pushing coding. And again, I don't have a huge background in coding. I took some college classes on HTML and CSS, and I've dabbled a bit myself. But I kind of learn a little bit with the kids, so to speak. But our first thing that we use is Scratch. I don't know if anybody in here has used it, but it's a free program available, developed by MIT, and it's all web-based. And the thing I really like about it is using it with our Chromebooks. It's something that they can get on their Chromebooks and utilize since it's all web-based. If you haven't been on it before, I've got the link to the website. Students can create their own accounts on Scratch, and it's basically a drag and drop style of coding. Okay, and actually, the last couple of years we started doing it my first year in the middle school, and for them it was a lot of them it was the very first time that they'd seen anything like this. Right now, our 4th grade teachers, our 4th grade team is starting to use things like Tinker and starting to use Scratch and things like that down at their level. So it'll be probably a couple of years before I see those kids, but they're going to come in with some more experience and things like that. But even though it's drag and drop coding, there's a lot of things that you can do with Scratch, and a lot of different types of projects that students can create. They can create not only games, but also kind of interactive stories and music video types of things that they can do with it. So it's not just, a simple half an hour and you're done thing necessarily. It's really whatever the kids want to make it to be. And the projects that I've seen created by some students really love it and they really take off, and they do things on there that I would have no clue how to do. I wasn't able to find this one, and actually the student never got completely done with this, but one student was working on creating a moving Super Mario Brothers basically world where it would actually scroll and he would jump and place blocks and recreate gravity and the whole thing. And he had this whole mathematical formula for how he went through and put in and used these different operators and fillers to recreate the sense of gravity in the game that I wouldn't have any clue of how to start. So he really applied some knowledge from his algebra and other math skills that I would have had no clue on how to do. When we do this, I give the students a lot of freedom for what they create. I kind of set up a rubric with some basic guidelines for them to follow. Like they have to use 3 or 4 different coding aspects from different categories. And some of them are pretty simple, okay? Things that aren't necessarily overly complex. But I guess what I'm trying to do in the 7th grade is touch those kids that have some creative ability and have some real interest in computers and want to go out and create and kind of spawn them, because we're trying to build some more actual programming classes into our high school. That's something that really just started last year a little bit. So we're trying to give them some I guess, initial, whet their appetite a little bit types of experiences with Scratch and some of the things we do. And so I've got a couple of projects that were created that I want to show. This one was done by a student that was a 7th grader last year, and it's a baseball game. Okay. He's got quite a few directions with this one.
Play ball.
So that's his own voice that he recorded and put into it. So basically you just click on the boxes. This represents the strike zone.
Strike. Ball. Strike.
Okay, so then it hits it out onto the field, and you have to use the arrow keys and the 1, 2, 3, 4s to throw the ball in, and you got to get it back to the pitcher. Okay, and hit the P button again and keep on clicking around. And whenever I've played this, the defense never really does very well. But it's pretty cool. But every little thing on here was something that he created. He designed the baseball players in the outfield. He designed the whole thing as far as when you click, what the likelihood is that the ball is going to be put in play. And Chicago and St. Louis are the two teams, so playing on the Cubs-Cardinals thing. And a lot of this has to, if you look down here, each one of these little elements on here, each player is called a sprite, and each thing has a bunch of coding that goes along with it. So all of these are things that he put in there and coded himself and figured out a way to make the ball fly and where to go when it was touched and all that sort of thing. So it was a pretty in-depth project. Again, all done by a 7th grader. Another one that's pretty good, I'll just skip to the third one here in the interest of time. The same student did these last two as well. This is a paintball game that was created by, again, a 7th grade. Actually, he might have done this when I was an 8th grader. And so he's got two different paintball courses. And I forget moving around as far as, but he's also got a bunch of different like weapons that he programmed in here. If you want to switch weapons, you can switch weapons. Yeah, he's got like a sniper, a bazooka, a shotgun, all sorts of different things that you can use. And then the goal is one team wins, red versus blue, in a paintball experiment. Okay. So again, that's a free program. Students can set up their own accounts on it. It's all web-based. They can go back in. They can save their stuff. They can go back and edit it. Okay. It's a pretty useful program to kind of introduce, I think, some block coding. Another program I started using a couple years ago was called Code Combat. And Code Combat differs from Scratch in that you do actually type in coding with Code Combat. And there's several different languages that they use. You can use JavaScript, Python, and there's even a couple others. I don't know if they're still in beta or not. But it's cool because it's all gamified. It kind of bases it on almost like a medieval type of storyline where you're a hero or a female participant in a game, and you have to actually type in lines of code in order to get your character to do certain things in order to move on to the next level. When they started this a couple years ago, when it was in beta, they kept on offering more and more and more content. And I'm going to see if I can find the right. Yeah. And they've gone through this year, and this is the first year they actually allowed you to create a teacher account where I could have students put in a code and kind of like any sort of admin type of subscription, I can see where the students are at and what they're doing. So if I view my class here, I can see what all of my students are on and what level they're on. You can actually dig down into that, and then you can assign certain levels and things of that nature too. They have a lot of different content. So there's a computer science 1, a computer science 2. They have a web design one or a web programming one, and I think they have a game programming one as well. I just went through, and the only thing they offer free now is their Computer Science 1 course, which they say takes about anywhere from probably about an hour to maybe an hour and a half to complete for students, just depending on how familiar they are with coding and how they catch on to the levels and so on. But all the other stuff is got a cost to it now. And I literally just emailed, a lot of my students are starting to get through that first level, or some of them are at least, and I just emailed them to see what the cost was, and I was actually just got an email back yesterday on that, and I was a little surprised at how much it was going to cost. They didn't give me an exact quote, but they said it's usually between $25 and $50 per kid. So yeah, that was a little bit of a red flag to me, like I don't think we're going to be able to pay that. So I was hoping in the range of like 5 or less per student if we were going to even think about going that way. That being said, I think the very first level does do a good job for preparing us for what we're going to do. We do this with 8th graders in the fall, and it does do a good job of preparing them for the first time. A lot of them haven't written code before, so it's at least getting them in the right direction of getting used to what that looks like, what that feels like. And just to I'll see if I can remember how to get to the lesson themselves. So it gives you the option of what type of character do you want to be? And I'll just take the first one.
Code combat.
And so with the very first level, it just kind of gives you a lot of tutorial types of things, tells you exactly what you need to do.
You can use these methods.
And it gives you a library of
Type your code on
things,
the
and
right.
that increases as you go through. Different types of scripts you can type in. Okay, so if you type in, and it'll come up automatically. So I want my hero to move down, and then hero move right again. Okay. And when you hit run, he goes through, does what you tell him to do. And if you do it right, you accomplish your goal and you get to move on to the next thing. So again, it's gamified. Obviously that level's pretty rudimentary, pretty simple, but you start adding in other elements. There's like fireballs that come across the screen, spikes that come across. There's doors that have a key that you have to pick up before you go through the door. So you have different movements. There's attacks. There are enemies that appear on the screen, so you have to type in things like hero attack, and you have to get it all in the right order, or you don't finish the level and you have to rethink it through. And it goes through things like loops, okay, repeating things and telling you how to do that in this first level too. So again, it's a pretty darn good start as far as actually getting them to write code and seeing what that looks and feels like. Okay. So in 8th grade, we really wanted to focus on programming overall throughout the 8th grade. And again, we kind of leave it and come back to it depending on what we're doing in the 8th grade course. There are some other things that we do that do tie into their classroom materials as well. But especially the second semester, we start focusing on what are some hands-on type of applications that students can use to not only program, but see how it functions with an actual physical object, okay? So Spheros are something that have been out for a few years, and the AEA purchased a kit a couple years ago, and we checked them out for the last couple of years, and it comes in a kit of 15. If you don't know what a Sphero is, it's basically, it looks like about the size of a pool ball or a tennis ball, a little bit bigger than a pool ball. And it has some gears and some weights in it. And so basically it rolls around like a remote control car. And it also has LED lights in it, so it can change colors. It's transparent, so you can see through, and it lights up blue, red, green, whatever color you want to make the LEDs inside to light up. So the AEA has a couple sets of those. We've checked them out for the last couple of years, and there are apps that work with a mobile device. And there's a regular Sphero app that's almost more, it's more kind of a game. And as you go through the Sphero app, your Sphero gains points and capabilities, and it can bounce around and do these different things as you go through and complete levels. And then there's one called Drive and Draw, where you take your iPad and you have different colors that you can basically draw out a map on your iPad, and you hit go, and the Sphero follows that pattern that you've created and also the colors that you've created. And it's just kind of a neat thing to see it do those shapes and whatever kind of course you've drawn out. And then there's a couple of programming things that are apps that are tied to it as well. There's one called MacroLab. MacroLab is similar to the Scratch application in that it's kind of got categories of things that you build together to program the Sphero to do certain things. So you can change the speed, you can change the direction, you can change the color, all those things within MacroLab using these categories. And then there's a second one called Basic, and that is a written code application. It basically comes up with a text editor, and you have to write in the code of what you want the Sphero to do. There's a couple things that we utilized. Also, the Sphero has an education packet, PDF packet that it started off with. And in the education packet, it comes with, I think it's like 8 predefined lessons using these two programming tools. So there's one where it has you use either the MacroLab or Basic to program geometrical shapes. Okay, so what would you do to get your Sphero to make a triangle? What would you put in there for the values to make a circle? What would you do to have it make the circle and then change the color every time it comes around to point 0? Okay, so it gets them thinking logically. It applies some geometry and algebra types of skills, and then it's also a lot of fun for them. Okay? We use this unit right after kind of winter break, so it'll be coming up in a little less than a month here. And you know, it's kind of one of those things that it's very engaging for the students to do, especially coming off a winter break when you're kind of in the middle and they can't get outside. We go out into the hallways. The teachers know that we get these, so we go out in the hallways and things like that, and they get to kind of be up and around and moving during a time of year that especially like this week when it's super cold. You know, January is almost always super cold anymore. They're not being able to get up and get outside. So it's also a nice thing to do during the wintertime to get them kind of up and around and not just sitting in their chairs in the doldrums all the time. So there's a lot of good tie-ins there with programming. And then the last thing we do is, I just did this last year for the first time, is creating kind of a golf course or an obstacle course that they have to, there's no guide for them. Like the other things there's a guide for, and kind of tells them what they need to program, or at least gives them hints, try this, try this. But the golf course is, okay, we've done 4 or 5 class periods of you being told what to do or following some directions and just kind of having to figure a little bit out on your own. Okay, now we're going to create just some obstacles for you to do, and we're going to see if you guys can figure it out on your own. And so I think I had like 5 or 6 holes that I set up for a class period. And there were some that were relatively simple, like, it was only about 5 feet long and it was a straight shot. So usually in just 1 or 2 tries, they could figure out how long they needed to tell the Sphero to run and at what speed and then when to stop. And they could figure that out relatively simply. But then there were some more difficult ones as well that were like all the way down a hallway or kind of in a circle pattern. So I've got some videos of students working with that. Okay, so this one is just kind of an angle around the corner here. And I just use masking tape to mark these off. So.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay. Close. Just a little bump of the wall, but that's pretty good. And so there's a little X there that they have to stop it on or try to stop it on. And this one was pretty much the one that was all the way down the hall, so.
That's it, that's it. That is it, come on.
Keep going. Come on back right. Come on back right. Keep. No, not that way. Not that way.
Yeah, that's
Oh. Oh, you're gonna get a bump from. Nope, never mind. Oh, you got a veer. You can see it's just as entertaining for me as it is for them. Just off the X. Good distance. And then probably the most difficult one was we kind of just had a big circle that it had to come around and stay within the lines. Okay, there you go. It's just outside. That's pretty good.
Then it goes outside again.
That's pretty good though. This is one of the more tricky ones because you got to keep it within a pretty short time frame. So again, we really appreciate having them. Again, it's free from the AEA to check out, and I think the kids enjoy it. I think it gives them a lot of engagement and also has some practical application for coding. The other thing we do in the spring is we actually have some drones that the students use to program as a hands-on tool as well. This idea I actually stole from iTech. I probably steal most of my ideas from iTech in some way, shape, or form, but if you haven't been to the iTech conference down in Des Moines, I highly recommend it. It's from a guy from Sioux City that originally presented on what he was doing with drones. So it kind of spawned my idea to get one for the school to try and apply some coding, apply some programming to, again, something else that was a little bit more hands-on. My first year, we kind of had to switch things from what he originally did. The program that I viewed and saw him use was actually on PC. And so I didn't realize that there wasn't a Mac version that was the same thing. So I purchased the drone and then realized I had to figure out how to do it a different way. And I'd still say probably my way of doing it isn't quite as nice or quite as hands-on or applicable, whatever, as what he did. But the students still get a lot out of it. So we have 5 of these drones. This is called an AR Parrot AR 2.0 drone. And they've gone down quite a bit in price. The very first year when we bought one, it was like $350 for one of these, and now they're under $200. And our educational foundation at Gilbert funded them. They found out what we were doing with the one, and they wanted to buy more. They're basically made of styrofoam on the outside, and then it's got the 4 propellers that keep it pretty balanced. And the first thing we do with them is you can fly them via iPad. We use our iPad carts. And we just have them log into the application and essentially fly them around. There were some questions when we were doing this about, and I've seen them kind of float around sometimes on the listservs and things from the AEA about whether this was something that we even could or should be doing from a legal standpoint. And I guess kind of what we came down to was the district was willing to take that risk. They thought there was enough of a benefit from having them that if something happened where a kid flew one into a car or something like that, we haven't had that happen yet, thank goodness, but they were willing to take some risk with it. So I had the support of the administration. I know some other people have asked me about that and haven't had that support, but I think that would be a big consideration. The other consideration is last year, the federal government required you to go through and basically register your devices, your drones. It was a requirement, and there's a lot of gray area with that, but it doesn't cost all that much. It's basically $5 for a license, and so we've got them all registered with the FAA and things like that, which really, as far as government things goes, wasn't that painful of a process. So we've got them all licensed, and then there's certain rules you have to follow, things that we wouldn't want to do anyway. You can't fly within a certain distance of an airport without letting them know. You can't go above a certain height, like 300 feet off the ground, which isn't something that I want the students doing with them anyway. There's things within the app that I can limit them so that they can't go a certain height. Unfortunately, with this model, as I found out, when you have 5 going at a time, they connect via Wi-Fi to the iPad. So there's distance limitations, and if you fly one too close to another iPad, I still haven't figured out how to prevent them from like trying to switch which one they're connected to, which gets kind of fun and interesting. We haven't had any major mishaps as far as students haven't gotten hurt or anything like that. Probably the worst thing that happened was last spring, and it happened to be just that one student that it might be a little touch and go in the class with that student type of thing. Happened to fly one and it just would not stop. Okay, so it was going about as maximum speed as it could directly north and west of us, or north and east of us towards Story City, and it went over the horizon, and he thought his life was over. I'm like, it happens. I'm not that upset. And I kept on repeating that in my head as I was walking 3/4 of a mile away. Luckily, the crops were out. I walked across a cornfield, and it got caught up in a fence row, and it was fine. Nothing hurt. But I'm not going to say it's perfect. It's not without its challenges, but it is pretty fun. And so they use JavaScript in the end to create a drone routine. They have a library again that they pick from. It can do some flips, it can do some different maneuvers, it can go high, it can go low. And so this is just a short video, or I'm not going to show the whole thing. So this is us outside connecting the drone to my laptop. They've got a script that they wrote for what their drone's supposed to do.
Heads up. Oh Lord. Watch out, guys.
Scatter! Scatter! Scatter!
Oh Lord. Look at this giant book. Oh yeah, you're right. It is.
Those are some of the flips that it can do and things like that.
My hand, trying to clean it.
What I'm thinking of doing this year is, so essentially so far what we've done with them the last couple of years is they have requirements for how many maneuvers they have to do with their drone. And it's still pretty engaging. The kids like it. The trick was, especially last year, I swear we live in the windiest district in the state. Like there's nothing around our schools at all that you can see. I mean, so the wind just whips right through there. And the one downside with these is, I mean, you really have to have a pretty calm day, as I figured out. If it's above 10 miles an hour, it will take it to Story City. So yeah. So that was one challenge last spring, is that finding a day, since I only see them every other day, where it wasn't raining and wasn't windy in spring in Iowa has been a challenge. But at the same time, they do really like it, and we just kind of, I look at the weather literally like every day during the spring to see when we can actually get outside. And we might move that to the fall, since it's a little less windy, it seems, in the fall. We have less rain. And then B, trying to make it some more of a competition based, where they not only have to create a routine, but they have to take off and land at a certain point type of thing to get them a little bit more math and thinking concept wise involved with what they're actually programming. And then the other drone that I have here, we had a guest speaker come in when we were talking about drones last year from the Boone County Sheriff's Department. He brought out a drone that the Boone County Sheriff's Department was using for several things. They used it to monitor like arson or damage due to, not necessarily arson, but any fire. Being that, after the fire, the building structures are unsafe and they don't want necessarily people going in. They also use it for search and rescue and things like that. So he came to our school and gave a demonstration to the kids on what his drone could do. And even though these are cool, the ones that we have, they have a camera and so on and so forth, what he brought was much more powerful. And what really blew me away was the capability of the camera on the drone he had. He took some video as he was demoing his drone to us as well. And I really couldn't believe the quality of the video, and not only the quality and crisp clarity of the video, but how stable it was. Just absolutely blew me away. And so it just kind of happened. Ironically, last summer I was at home doing a little research on drones, and our superintendent called me and said, hey, we're thinking of doing a promotional video for the district. Would you be interested, or would your drones be able to take some footage for us of the different buildings and so on? And my response was, well, they could, but the camera on these it's HD technically, but it's the lowest end of HD, and it's not real stable. But I told him, and I'd been talking with our building principal too, about possibly getting one of the drones that the Boone County Sheriff's Department showed us. And so that's this one. This one's called a Phantom, and this is a Phantom 3 advanced drone. And the camera is mounted here. And the difference between this is just got a still camera right on the front here. And it basically just wobbles and goes wherever the drone goes. This is, when it's on and running, it's on a set of gimbals that basically balance the camera so it's completely stable. And you can also tilt it up and down and move it around some. And so the district decided to go ahead and purchase one because they're actually a new version out. And so the version 3 was going on sale in a lot of places. So it was much more affordable than what the Boone County Sheriff's Department had paid for theirs. So the promotional video that we created, some of the footage in here is of the drone. I won't make you suffer through the whole video of promoting Gilbert District here, but I just wanted to kind of show you some of the shots that it has because I think it is pretty incredible.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Beecher, and I'd like to welcome you to the Gilbert Community School District.
So this is some of the footage from
Gilbert
it.
District is located in the city of Gilbert, 4 miles north of Ames, right in the heart of the great state of Iowa. The Gilbert District is a shining example of a small district doing big things. The district.
So this one in particular, this is one of the times that I maxed it out as far as how high it would go, basically at the maximum level that I'm supposed to legally go. And it's amazing to me how fast that thing can get there. I mean, it can get up to 300 feet in like a couple of seconds is all. And it's so stable. And then this is actually me right in the middle of the football field, just as a speck. You can hardly see. There we go.
The campus is comprised of 4 buildings, an elementary, an intermediate, a
And as you're
middle
going, I
school,
mean,
and
it's
a
just
brand new high
so
school.
stable. Like
Gilbert
that, you can
District
tell the
strives
wind
to
is really
engage
going
all
that day.
students in powerful learning
And it's
experience.
it just kind of holds its own. It's very stable. Honestly, this is one from me too, driving it through a building. This was actually more challenging because when you're outside, the wind is fairly consistent. So it basically self-adjusts, the motor self-adjusts to stabilize itself. What I figured out when you're in a building, that was the only time I ever crashed it. Don't tell Mr. Beecher, our superintendent. But the wind currents in there, you don't notice them as much when you're walking around, but the wind currents are going all over the place. So it doesn't necessarily know its surroundings as well. And so it just kind of starts drifting and going where it wants. And so it's a little bit of a challenge, but I'm still pretty stoked about it. And the way this one works is it's basically got like a game controller to fly it around instead of using an iPad. So you actually plug in a device. I just use my cell phone in here, and it runs via GPS, and you basically just fly it around with this little video game controller. And it's pretty intuitive. And there's also like some safety features on it. If it gets low on battery, it will automatically try and come back to where you took off from based on the GPS. So if for some reason you were to lose the signal on it, the signal on this goes supposedly for like 2 or 3 miles. And I've never obviously tried that, but this particular version is only going to let you go. I think it's like, I forget what it even says in the box, but maybe a couple 100 feet at the most. That one will go a couple of miles, and so if you lose track of it, something happens, it's automatically going to try and come back to where it took off from. And then I might just talk about one or two other things. This was something that we started this year. Our guidance counselor actually started this. He wanted to start a robotics club. In our middle school, we have 6 days throughout the year where we have an early release, and then the kids go to get to select clubs. So we have like a running club, we have a strength and conditioning club, we have all these different clubs that they can be involved in. So instead of having normal class that day, they go to their club. We have a Pinterest one that there's 20 or so different clubs that they have a choice to go to. A couple years ago, we tried doing just a regular technology club with the goal of having the students become kind of Chromebook experts and helpers, and it just never really gained a lot of traction. Meeting only just once a month or less. We didn't have a lot of success in having the students have time. Plus, they've got class, so when are they going to help? So it just never really turned into what we wanted it to turn into, with students becoming kind of technology helpers and leaders. And so last year I actually did strength and conditioning club because I just kind of wanted to do something different. I'm doing tech all the time, so let's do something different on those days. And then this year the guidance counselor approached me about doing a robotics club, and I was kind of hesitant at first. I'm like, I kind of want to do something else. But the more he talked about it, the more excited I got about it. He's really kind of led the way with it, to be honest with you. I've just been kind of the helper. But he bought what's called a VEX robotics kit. And again, he got our education foundation to purchase these for the middle school. And they're pretty cool. The kids that we have are really super engaged. It's really the first club that I've been involved in. They've always been good. I've always enjoyed them. But it's really the first time that I've had a club like this where they actually are just really exploring and wanting to learn and doing some really cool things in their groups. And it's open from 6th to 8th graders. And so this kind of gives you an idea of what our goal is by the end of the year. Our last club day will be in May. But they're supposed to build some robots directed at this competition.
Welcome to Swept Away. Swept Away uses an easy-to-assemble field that can be put together in 5 minutes without the use of any tools. It just snaps together.
So we have this course as part of the kit that we bought.
Swept Away is played on an 8-foot by 8-foot field, which is divided in half by a 12-inch high wall. At the center of this wall are 2 18-inch tall trapezoidal-shaped goals, one on each side of the wall. There are also 2 4-inch tall slots along the base of the wall. On each side of the field, there are 12 small foam soccer balls, as well as 6 foam footballs. Each match is played with 1 robot on each side of the field. Let's have these robots show us how the game is played. The object of the game is simple. Get as many balls onto your opponent's side of the field as possible during a 2-minute match. Robots can put balls over the wall, or through the wall. Robots get extra points for scoring the soccer balls in goals. Remember, you're always trying to score on the other side of the field. This robot just scored on himself. All scores are tabulated at the end of the match. If you put a ball on your opponent's side of the field early, don't be surprised if yours ends up back on your side of the field.
Okay, so you get the main idea there. It'll be interesting to see where we get with this. We actually just had they have a beginning kit that kind of gives you the directions of what you're supposed to build. And we just had that competition last week. And some of the kids, we have seven different robots, and some of the kids did a really good job of finishing their robots for that competition. It was supposed to be a cup stacking competition. And some of them didn't get quite done or didn't quite get the robot to where they wanted it to be to compete. The second part of the year, they're going to be having the freedom to really kind of build their own, and there's all sorts of different components that they could use to build these robots. So it'll be interesting to see if we have enough time. We've actually given them some extra time after school to come in and work on this if they want as well. And several groups have really put forth extra effort and come in and done some extra stuff. But at this point, they can kind of create what they want for this next competition that we'll be doing in May. So I'm excited to see what they come up with. I know there's some really complex different ideas for robots that they can do. But there's a couple other things that I added in here to talk about, but at this point, I know we're getting kind of close to the end on time. So does anybody have any questions about what it is we do or any of the things I talked about or anything like that?
I was just wondering, like, if you're just starting out with drones, would you suggest getting more of the cheaper ones or getting less of the more expensive ones?
That's a good question. I mean, again, I kind of just stole the idea from the guy I saw at iTech and asked him what he was using. And I think the next year he was actually switching to using, I personally wouldn't use, like this isn't one we're using with students. In a way, it might actually be easier to fly, but it is significantly more as far as the cost. So, and also I think there's more that could probably go seriously wrong with that one. I guess again, it kind of depends on what you want to do. If you just want them to experience flying a drone, there's so many out there now that you can probably get for more like $50 that are still pretty valuable, and you can fly them around like a remote control. If you're going to do the programming, I don't know if there's any other resources out there about ones that, I know even Tinker now has something where in there, I haven't looked at it, but I just saw it online that Tinker had something that where you could program drones with the Tinker app with the block coding. So you might look at that and see what's compatible if you're looking at the programming route. But again, it kind of depends on what you want to do. Me personally, if I was just flying around, I'd probably just do like a $50 one, and then if they break, you can maybe get another one type of thing.
Where do you compete with your robotics? Because I've done FL, Lego League in the past. And
Yeah.
They had the competition in Ames and so on. And is there like a big competition you go to with that?
There are, and I don't think we're going to do that this year. It's called a swept away challenge, and so you basically go and compete against other schools in that ball challenge, football and soccer ball challenge. And I think the closest one is in Council Bluffs. I don't know if they might be adding more possibly or something like that, but I think we're maybe setting that as a goal next year. This year we're just kind of learning on the fly with the kids, so we're not there yet. But yeah, I know there is one in Council Bluffs. I don't know if there's maybe one there might have been one over in the Quad Cities possibly too. I don't remember for sure though.
Any other questions? Okay, let's give Troy a round of applause and thank him for sharing that information.